Hi, Corey.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm good. I guess we're supposed to introduce ourselves, so why don't you begin?
I'm Choire Sicha. I'm unemployed and a contributor to the New York Observer and the Los Angeles Times.
And I'm John Fine, the media columnist for BusinessWeek, blogger, contributor to CNBC. Man of not enough sleep, apparently. I think I'd like to thank you, Corey, because, inevitably, one of the great questions in New York media is, how do we pronounce your name? So I think now we know.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's a problem. What do you do on CNBC?
I'm an on-air contributor. I go on to talk about matters media.
Such as
newspapers, television, radio, internets.
Primarily like business end, or?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a business channel, so yes.
I don't get that channel, so it's... Yeah.
Apparently you get the game show channel, though. I remember talking to you about Match Game some years ago.
The game show channel is the world's best invention. It's the greatest thing on earth. It's just Match Game reruns 6 hours a day, half the time. It's awesome.
I wish we could talk about Match Game more. I will say this, though. I mean, I once got an email from you years ago about Match Game that it was possibly a 2-sentence email, and it was one of the funniest things I read in my entire life.
Wow.
I think the key phrase was, "Is anything better than Match Game?" And who am I to say no? Who am I to disagree?
You're no one to say no.
I'm no one to say no to Gene Rayburn, and maybe we can loop back to them.
Yeah.
But in case that people are still watching this, Corey. So Corey, if I remember this correctly, you were just on the Hillary mobile in South Carolina.
Well, I was actually sort of chasing. Well, I was zigging and zagging. I just got in from South Carolina late last night, which is why, if you could see me, you'd know that I look like I've been hit by a truck.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you got dressed up, because I'm wearing French cuffs and everything.
I bet you are.
Actually, I'm not.
Well, you can afford it now.
Touche, Mr. Sicha.
We'll get to that later.
We'll get to that later, indeed.
I was following behind the Hillary mobile, and I was sort of zigging to see Obama and our former President Clinton, and even Mr. John Edwards, who is still in the race.
He's still running for president.
He is.
When you say zigging and zagging, I'm getting this picture of you, like in like this convertible, like sort of, swinging in and out of press motorcades or something. What exactly do you mean by that?
The campaign stops in South Carolina were madness. They, each campaign would sort of overlap the same towns and then zig the opposite direction. It was some sort of calculated ploy to both duplicate places for, where Obama had been, then Hillary would be there, or vice versa, and but they were kind of going for pretty much mass saturation of pretty much every town. So I followed. I didn't want to get stuck on the bus, actually. I kind of tried to follow the buses because I feel like people got a little bit trapped in a bubble, and people on the Hillary bus, were like, we're jealous, we're tired, we're on this bus, it's...
Yeah, I hear the Hillary bus is just party central. But I'm curious, what were your observations of observing a process that's dedicated to observing a process, if we can sort of follow that around? Because, I think you and I were both talking about, the sort of perceptions that get, cooked inside this bubble, if I can mix a metaphor. I think I talked about that with you. I might have just talked about that with myself. But nevertheless, tell us about the phenomenon of the press observing this phenomenon.
I mean, what happens is, you get on this bus, you roll into town, you're set up with reserved seats in a roped-off section, and, you do your work. I mean, the good thing about being on the bus with these people is they do get access, sometimes to the candidate, not necessarily that often, and they, do get access to campaign staff, which is, doesn't ever result in Stockholm Syndrome. I mean, our reporters are smarter than that in general, but, at a certain point...
Well, I mean, I think, the McCain bus in 00 and to a degree 08, I mean, I think there's certainly that. Everyone wants to love him so bad,
Yeah, but if you look at, if you watch Anna Marie Cox's of Time.com's Twitter feed, she definitely didn't drink any Kool-Aid on that bus. I'm
actually not, because I remember her writing about in the New Hampshire primary and how emotional it was there and how she couldn't believe it. And it's unfair to pick on Anna because she's done a very, very good job of keeping an eyebrow cocked at the entire process, which is really the only way to regard it. But I was thinking, like, but I mean, you're in this room, you're exhausted like everyone else, I guess. But you tell me, because I haven't done it for obvious reasons.
I don't think it's any more different than previous campaigns. It's probably a little more. I don't know. I don't know if I could compare it actually, but I just feel like I remember. So I was at one Bill Clinton event in Charleston, and the bus rolls in, and people are actually, he didn't have a bus, but like that pack, some of the Hillary people rolled in to kind of cover Bill while she was out of state, who jumped off her plane, and I was trying. A woman had asked a question. She was African American. She asked a question about all the race baiting in the media. So I was like, after it was over, I went over to her and I was like, "You need to tell me like what you're seeing. What's this race baiting in the media? Who's saying what? And like Bill's person like grabbed me, who was probably a Hillary person devoted to Bill that day, grabbed me and was like, if you want color, you can come get it later. And I was like, I'm not looking for color. I'm looking to like suss out what these Bill and Hillary people are proposing. So there's this sense of, and definitely of being corralled that the press
I think there's that Clintonian deft touch with the press that so many have come to know and love over the years.
And Barack Obama's people who handle the press. I don't mean David Axelrod, who handles the press campaign, but the actual youngsters who are some of them were very nice, but a couple of them were just hideous. They were hideous people and like rude and tired and surly. And I was, I can't imagine being on the Obama bus. It just sounded deathly, frankly.
Well, oh, really? Why? This is interesting because I think the perception from out here is that the Obama campaign would be more quote unquote fun because obviously if you're on Hillary's bus, they're going to regard you with a great deal of suspicion.
I think that I've always found that Hillary people are more used to it at this point. They're like, yeah, you're going to write what you're going to write, But the Obama kids, they're pretty young, and I remember New Hampshire primary night. I was there with Obama, and he delivered a great speech, and a perfect non-concession speech, and it was actually a lovely moment, and. Afterwards I went up to one of the traveling press kids and was like, thank you so much. I know tonight was really hectic. You dealt with the crazy New Hampshire fire marshals who were trying to keep people out. And he was just like, whatever, and I was like, wow, okay, gotcha. This is, I don't know.
Wait, is this a you learn fast sort of moment? Do you think, or they're all really unpleasant people to deal with moment? I mean, I'm not quite sure where you come down on that one.
I don't know. Maybe it's just really stressful. Maybe their bosses are all monsters. I don't know. But the day to day. I remember one of the reporters telling John Copeland at the Observer, like they were just being starved on the bus. Actually, at one point, they were like, "Just give us a sandwich. We're dying."
It always comes down to amenities with the press, doesn't it?
Sure. I remember that on a Friday night in Charleston that just passed right before the South Carolina primary. The poor reporters dove into this pile of sandwiches. They were like, "Oh, if it was 10 o'clock at night." Pat Healy's there wolfing down a sandwich. I'm dying. It's unpleasant. But and so.
But everyone's so strung out on the process. Everyone is they feel they can't miss anything.
Yeah, well, and then they have to construct narrative from this time they've spent shuttling from event to event.
Right.
And the Times and other papers everyone's desperately hungry for a narrative, and I don't know if you can construct that narrative from inside that bubble. You sort of can. I mean, they're doing.
Well, I mean, you can construct a narrative out of anything. I mean, it's just a question of how real it is and how fact based it is.
Though, can any of us do any better following the press bus in a car? I mean, I was driving 4 and 6 hours a day. Did I do any better? Not necessarily. So I can't.
You were following come on! Don't you want to take some really vicious swipes at the press here? Or I mean, is there something to be said about the artificiality of this process and the inherent impossibility of, I don't know, just something about the artifice. Help me out here. It's early in the morning, you know?
It's early! No,
it's early.
I mean, there were
early.
definitely reconstructions of timelines in newspapers that were incorrect. I mean,
the TikToks. Love the TikToks, yeah.
Because people were, there were like 3 or 4 people across the state, so they were, smushing stuff together into a narrative story. But but then, they had quotes from misidentified the wrong events, and you can't. Compiling a story from 4 people stringing and then one lead writer is going to always result in little disasters. But coffee. There we go. I hesitate to condemn any of them because they're difficult conditions, and also they're just not giving you anything.
Of course not. Of course not. I mean, I can't imagine Hillary's people are going to be like, "Hello, Mr. Sicha. What do you need from us today?"
Right.
Right. Because you write for that orange newspaper, and you used to be with the Gawkers and everything. And
the only time a campaign has ever come to me and been like, "Do you need anything?" was once when I followed Hillary Clinton during the Senate campaign, and I just heard she was 2 hours north suddenly after in a quick stop, and so I was like, "Screw it, I'll drive." And I was the only reporter there, so they were like, "What are you doing here, even?" And so I got I could have sat down with her basically if I'd wanted to. So, and the press bus will never get that. Although they'll get time on the plane, they'll get all that other stuff. So I don't know. Access is access, I guess, right?
Yeah, which is half the problem. I mean, I just there's just this inevitable disreality. I mean, you bring up a good point about narratives, and I think you and I were talking last night about, or maybe that was somebody else. About how the press was just so ready to stick a fork in Hillary right after Iowa. I mean, the Wall Street Journal the day of the New Hampshire primary was basically saying, if I remember correctly, they're going to move on and they're in panic mode and they might lose everything and oh my God, and then what happened in New Hampshire? And so there's this whiplash thing. The other thing that strikes me is that. I feel that we were all really geared up towards a very rapid process with the short amount of time between Iowa and New Hampshire. And now it seems like there's just an eternity between primaries. I mean, it's just killing me. It's like, I'm not getting, after New Hampshire, I was like, there's 2 weeks until South Carolina. What are we going to do? And in the meantime, everybody on the bus has to keep filing, they've got all the airtime to fill, they got all those column inches to fill. And I guess, as you saw, not a whole lot actually happens, I'm guessing. I mean, there's not a lot that's unsurprising or unscripted or unusual or anything. Am I right?
Well, it's funny. I just feel like a lot of things don't make it into press.
Okay, what didn't make it into press?
Well, I feel like they will in the long run. But, so Hillary leaves South Carolina on Thursday or whatever, goes to 2 other states, goes back to New York City for 2 fundraisers, then pops back down to South Carolina, the next day. That was sort of talked about in the press, but a lot of it, there's no way to squeeze that all in. I think for most people.
Yeah, that's true. Even with places that are giving this an incredible amount of yardage, and it is yardage, it's not even inches, the Times and whatnot. I guess maybe we should move on.
Yeah, I'm being very incredibly boring. I don't want to castigate the traveling press because they're. Because I think they do work very hard. I feel like I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's troubles with the coverage. I feel like we won't. I don't know. I feel like we're not learning things from the newspapers, but that.
Okay, but what should we be learning that we're not learning? And does it exist somewhere but we're just not turning to it because it's not exciting?
I don't know. I mean, I think what's one of the problems is that a lot of this stuff that goes on actually isn't news. These events aren't news. The things, the subtle shifts and talking points aren't necessarily news. They're important over the longer term. So a daily newspaper, doesn't have something to say necessarily, unless it's some fake event. I don't know.
Okay, we'll move on.
We'll move on.
So I wrote down. They were very excited about you and I to talk about snark.
Yeah.
Now I've never quite been sure what that is exactly, but perhaps you are. And but you actually brought up an interesting point about how I guess the dividing line between a blogger and say what Kit Seeley is doing in her quote unquote blog or her online reporting for the New York Times is kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, what's really interesting about the New York Times is that they've adopted a very, very casual, very voicey style online. David Carr's done it in culture. Kit Seeley's doing it now in politics. Virginia Heffernan is doing it too.
Yeah,
I mean, they're writing as they naturally would, which is
right.
kind of astonishing. I mean, even Patrick LaForge with City Room, the City Room blog, has a very free hand, I'd say, in a lot of ways, as do his staff. Bloggerdom has overrun the newspaper world online, and it leaks into the paper too.
Right. So, does this completely negate all the past couple of years of your work life, or have you actually taken over the world?
Yeah, no, we won. We definitely won.
Who's we, Corey?
We are the people who came out of the internet. It's a return to, I suppose in a way it's not. It's not like bloggers invented anything, but it is a return to this sort of, first person, contextual, whatever, blah-de-blah journalism. It's completely overrun, these papers, which is great. I think it's great, and readers like it.
Was it really the case that 5 years ago, the New York Times was just this incredibly, dull, objective? I'm making air quotes.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Because it wasn't. The New York Times is actually a decent written piece of work with some voice, and I feel it's been like that for like 30 years, or maybe not 30, but like 20.
Yeah. That's probably right.
Are we supposed to disagree on some of this stuff, Corey?
No, we will disagree on a lot of this. Don't worry about that. I still don't like you.
It's mutual, for God's sakes. I make fun of your beard, but I have no idea what it looks like right now.
It's out of control.
Of course it is. What
were we talking about? I'm sorry. No,
we're talking about snark and blogs.
We're talking about snark. Snark is
the sort of. What are my notes from yesterday? Let me look at that. Maybe that'll give us some.
We can just cut the first 20 minutes of this, which is great. So we're going to do this all day until we get somewhere good.
That's right. Well, yeah, because we do get multiple takes. I understand. That was a joke.
Where's my makeup and hair person? The thing is, snark is this horrible made up term that's used to denigrate. Criticism. It's used to discard actual criticism. And when people, go around calling Gawker snarky, it's totally used to diminish and set aside its, the criticisms that Gawker was sometimes half-heartedly, but was definitely making about, various systems that are in place.
Such as?
In a larger term, especially economic systems, systems of pay and rock star magazine editor status and
does that even exist anymore? But that world is just shrinking now.
How so? No, I don't see Anna Wintour or Graydon Carter, in any dilemmas of rock star status.
Oh, of course, but that strikes me as the last thing standing. In a certain sense. There will be some. Is atavistic the right word to use right now? It's too early for me to access the dictionary part of my brain. But something is going to survive. But I think the idea that magazine editors, which because Gawker is so Manhattan-based, loom unusually large. The idea of them as being some kind of totems of that there's some kind of cultural importance or centrality to them, I think is really just almost silly at this point. That world is really going away. It's smaller than it was 5 years ago. It's smaller than it was 10 years ago. It's much smaller than it was 20 years ago. Any aspiring, Jan Wenner wanted to start a magazine. A Jan Wenner of today would never start a magazine.
That's right.
You just can't do it. There's some, I don't know, there's almost some like nostalgia built into like Gawker's approach there, at least on that point, because how powerful are these people really?
Well, no, I mean,
or how powerful is this system really?
The system itself is extremely powerful in terms of Graydon Carter may not be particularly talented, but he definitely covers stories, everything, content lives or dies at that magazine, which employs a lot of people by him, as long as he has that job.
Yes, which he'll probably have forever. It's a successful magazine.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty confident it's a very successful magazine. It may not be my favorite magazine in the world, but it's. You get a hernia half the time lifting the damn thing.
Oh yeah, no, ad pages are fine. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. But again, I mean, like that's one segment. I mean, look at what's happening with Time Inc. Look at Time Magazine. Look at Newsweek. I mean, my own publication, BusinessWeek. I mean, it's an unfair comparison, but in the year 2000, I should have this figure off the top of my head, but we probably had twice as many ads in there as we do now.
That's kind of remarkable.
Well, 2000 was a special time, Corey.
Yes, it was.
It was a very special time. What were you doing in 2000? You young punks, you.
I don't know. I was blogging, I think. I think I started blogging that year.
In 2000?
No, I think I started blogging in 99, actually.
Did they... But you didn't even call it blogging then. You called it... You had a website, right?
No, we called it blogging then.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you kids, you're so crazy inventing new words.
Everyone jumped onto the internet after 9/11, and then they all called them war blogs. Then
yeah, actually, I guess you're right. It's just so long ago that I can't remember correctly.
It's a really long time ago now.
It was really. It's very funny, and you know what the crazy thing is? We still don't know what to call this decade, and we're almost done with it. Boy, that was a conversation killer right there.
Yeah, it was. I was like, I'm not going to call this decade anything.
There you go. There, boy. That's fight the power. Fight the power.
Yeah.
I have a phrase written down here: Clinton's impenetrable press strategy, which you wrote a post about recently.
Yeah. People. I mean, one of the. I mean, there's actually something interesting to look at in the press, which covering Bill Clinton, which is that So Maureen Dowd, I mean, like, from Maureen Dowd on, like, people have talked about Bill Clinton, like, destroying his legacy, or, Bill Clinton's... the problem is, so everyone has to attach meaning to what Bill Clinton is doing, and, they can attach whatever meaning they want, because no one really knows why he's doing what he's doing, and whether it'll play out in the long term, it'll play out in the short term, whether it won't play out at all, which is completely possible, but, this is a moment when we've had to attach narrative to just actual happening events, and it's completely baffling.
Which part of it is?
What's that?
You mean like divining what the actual significance?
Yeah. Why is Bill Clinton saying Jesse Jackson won South Carolina? Bill Clinton has good reasons for saying.
I think there's a skin tone thing going on there.
Yeah, but Bill Clinton's smarter than that. It's an attempt to diminish Obama's win, sure. So it's basic spin, but also, there's always a deeper game with Bill Clinton. I don't know.
Well, okay. I think, yeah, one thing that I liked about that post that you did was that there was sort of the implicit assumption that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we think this is really dumb, but maybe there's something 2 chess moves down the way that we are not seeing.
Oh, yeah. No.
The counter to that, which actually I believe, is that, Bill Clinton's actually been out of the game since 1999-2000. He hasn't really had to be in the give and take of a campaign. He's generally dealt with really adoring crowds, and he hasn't been in a lot of really, what's the word, partisan sort of adversarial situations. You've probably seen some of the speeches he gives. He talks, he does all those beautiful hand gestures, everyone swoons, and he shakes hands, and then he does whatever he does, and boom, on to the next thing, and he gets a huge check. Now he's in a place where the press is following him, questioning him, And there's all those weird tropes where, like where the tiny things become significant, like his face got all red and angry looking, and, he seemed out of control, and it's almost like, there's been kind of a sub-theme going, has he lost some of his game? I think it's actually possible, because, his instincts are really great, but let's face it, they're kind of from a past media generation at this point. And I think we can actually say that. And it's been a long time. Is there a dog in the background there?
That's the neighbors in the hallway.
Okay, well there's construction going on outside my window, so I guess we're about the same.
I thought your maid was doing the laundry. I thought that's what that noise was.
Yeah, that's right. And Bill Clinton, what was I talking about? Past media generation.
No, everyone thinks Bill Clinton. I mean, this is what people think. Everyone's wandering around South Carolina going, Bill Clinton's lost his game. Like, what's he doing? How's this happening? It's inconceivable that Bill Clinton has lost his game.
Why is it inconceivable?
Because he's Bill Clinton. He's a master manipulator.
He's a master manipulator, but that doesn't mean that every situation, he's going to respond to every situation, and he could be applying, more importantly, experiences set in an entirely different era to this one.
What's so different about this era? Just because there's bloggers, or what?
I would argue that the news cycle has sped up immeasurably, that there's more bloggers, and that there's just much more stuff out there. Everything is visible now. In the 92 and the 96 campaign, there was no YouTube. Blogging wasn't anything what it was. I mean, he himself says, like, my presidency was great. In 1993, when I took office, there were 6 websites, and when I left, there were 85 billion. And he ran for president in an era where he had cable news and blah, 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 and tapes of him talking with Jennifer Flowers appear in the National Enquirer, and all that tut-tutty stuff. But there wasn't, there weren't dedicated websites. You didn't have 529 groups. I feel that there's actually a different dimension out there right now. And maybe, look, we've both watched him speak. We know it's like watching Muhammad Ali box. He's an incredible performer, but maybe his instincts are from another generation, Liza Minnelli works on stage. She does it like, Liza Minnelli comes from like the Judy Garland generation. She doesn't come from the, help me out here, finish this metaphor for me, please, I beg you. She
Whatever, straight guy, you're on your own. Judy Garland, I don't know.
God damn it, Sicha. But Liza Minnelli doesn't come from the YouTube generation. She comes from the Judy Garland generation. And I'm not sure that the instincts all translate. Some of them do, but not all of them do.
I don't know. I feel like he's super. This is a man who's used to being covered. This is a man who still travels with press on his plane. This is a guy who,
But in a different way. I don't think he gets covered that adversarially when he's, setting up whatever he's setting up in Africa, or for that matter, giving like his speeches to, thinky tank groups for, $100,000 a pop or whatever his thing is.
I don't know. This is someone who's been like. He's had run-ins with the press before, let's just say. You know what I mean? I don't think there's any surprises for him when he finds, getting trashed day and night on TV with video. And, there was still, on election night, they were still playing clips of him hugging Monica Lewinsky. It was insane. I was like, I can't believe this is still on TV, but here it is. That was CNN, too. I don't think he's in any way unprepared or surprised for, the current age. And what exactly is the added value of the YouTube, the time of YouTube or whatever, people...
Well, talk to George Allen, because, he'd probably be running for president if someone hadn't filmed him saying macaca, and then and everybody saw it.
Yeah, but that was classic Oppo research, wasn't it?
No, it was, but there was a new distribution channel that wouldn't have been there in 2000.
Yeah, it was a little easier, but to get out. Anyone can take advantage of anything a little easier now, but that could have happened.
Possibly, but not to the degree it did. Everything is visible in this campaign in a way it wasn't before. I actually think that works in favor of the candidates because there's just too much crap. Are you and I going to spend 4 hours watching Mitt Romney speeches while he was governor of New Hampshire? I'd rather stick a needle in my eye, but.
Well, that's the thing that we start to miss. You have people. Who's on long-term projects. Who's researching. The history. There's one piece. TNR on the history of Huckabee back at home with the press or whatever,
Right.
which is good, and it was a decent piece, and it took someone 2 weeks to do on their own, but which no one else is doing. So that's what's going by the road, and that's we're all treating these presidential candidates like they're new contenders, like they have no past whatsoever, except probably Bill and Hillary. And that's actually a journalistic disservice that the YouTube age is foisting upon.
Well, if YouTube is the only stuff, that's true. But I mean, I feel that the deep stuff is there. I mean, the New York Times has done exhausting, groaning pieces. I keep referring to the New York Times because I live in New York. But, the big newspapers, which are universally available online, have done, big, exhaustive pieces on the minutiae of healthcare policy and economic policy. I don't feel that's being crowded out. With Huckabee, I feel we're going to start hearing a lot less about him because he just looks like he's on the way out unless he becomes the VP.
Huckabee's a monster. I mean, like, the thing about Huckabee is when you're with him, he's the most reasonable man. He just talks really quietly and nicely. And then if you write down what he's saying, you find out that he's like spouting crazy.
It's terrible, Corey. Are you going to tell me you're coming out in favor of evolution right now? Because I'm getting off the phone right now if that's the case.
The man's a horror show, but he's so reasonable. I wasn't frightened of him in person at all. I thought he was like this. I was like, all right, whatever. He's, Baptist, fine.
Mm-hmm.
He's a nut job.
Well, yeah, okay. I mean, there's certain things there, but he's not angry about it, so it's supposed to be okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Unlike Giuliani, who's just angry about everything, but...
Not anymore. It's the kinder, nicer Giuliani now.
It's yes.
It's insane. It's
I shouldn't say anything about this because, who knows, he may pull out some sort of, massive victory tomorrow, and I'll feel even stupider for having talked about it.
Please, I'll give you $50 if Giuliani wins Florida.
50?
What do you give me?
Well, but then what do I give you? Like what, 2 if he loses? I mean, what are the odds at this point?
That's a terrible bet.
It is a terrible bet. It is
Never
a terrible
mind.
bet.
Rescinded.
But I think this could be. I mean, there were a couple months there where people thought that he could lose his way to the nomination, but once everything kicked in, we saw that was sort of impossible. Anyway, that's boring.
We're supposed to be talking about snark, John.
Are we supposed to be talking about snark? Actually, or could we talk about your tortured work history and the Nick Denton 12 post a day diet and your thoughts about how journalists all hate their jobs or something like this? I'm doing a disservice to what you actually said.
Oh, that's fine. Quite all right. You're blogging with words right now.
I'm blogging with words right now. Yes, that's true. And you know what? I don't have time to fact check it, so I just got to go out with the story.
How many years have you been a columnist for BusinessWeek now?
I've been at BusinessWeek since May of 2005, and before that I was at Ad Age. When we first started emailing each other, I was at Ad Age.
Yes, that's correct.
That is correct.
So your work history isn't terribly tortured, although you didn't keep jobs that
I said your terribly tortured work history.
Yeah, I know. I was just trying to compare and contrast.
Well, I mean, my tortured work history is all the prehistory. I mean, I've been sort of safely ensconced, with like full-time jobs since 2000. Right. Before that, for years, I was freelancing, which was,
And I believe you spent 5 weeks at Brill's Content at one point, actually.
The correct term would be 6 weeks and 3 days, but yes, that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true.
I'll give you a tortured work history. You're unemployable.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, look. I mean, I was 30. I was fired. I mean, there were definitely some dark weeks there. What can I tell you?
What are you gonna do?
What am I gonna do? Spend a few years freelancing, then go running back to something where I can get health insurance and not worry about paying it on the first of each month. But enough about me. What about you?
I don't know. I don't have a job. It's great. I don't know.
You were talking yesterday about the angst of the working. Again, help me out here. We did have this conversation, right? That was you.
I'm not helping you out here.
You didn't help yourself then. Don't worry about me. I'll go. I can take care of myself. It's you should worry about, young man.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I just, I don't know. I just found more and more. I just have to say, I just phenomenally dislike, working conditions in this country. I mean, not to take too far a step with it, much less. I mean, you and I are members of the useless class. We don't have many skills, particularly.
But we're very good at annotating, though.
Sure.
Yes.
But so for those of us without trades, particularly, and what you and I do is not quite a trade; it's something else.
It's a craft. I would say it's a trade. I mean, the prospect of asking people questions, sifting information, presenting it. I mean, there's nothing dishonorable about the basics of it.
No, but any idiot can do it.
I wouldn't say idiot, but I would tend to agree with you. And this is where, I go on these panels and people are always trying to set up a blogger-journalist dichotomy.
Uh-huh.
And, I work for a quote-unquote professional journalistic organization, but it's not like I did a driving test and got a license for it. If you ask people questions, if you ask both sides questions, if you make a decent effort to go through all the journalism 101 stuff, well then yes, I think you are, performing journalistic services. And you can do that for the New York Times, and you can do that for the National Enquirer, and you can do it for, a website, a blog. I'm sure you're going to disagree with that.
Well, I do disagree with that because, screw both sides. Who cares? But no, I believe, I don't know. I just feel like whatever. It's like there's like 40 things in here. Sorry, and I just. You've worked at places actually that pay actually fairly well. The trade publications like Ad Age. I know reporters make like $90,000 a year there.
Wow.
Oh, I guess you didn't.
Those
but
bastards.
Anyway,
those bastards.
I guess things have gotten a little better since you've left, or maybe
yeah,
it was just you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Maybe it was you. People make a respectable living, and but. What's my point, John? What are we talking about?
Well, hey, you didn't help me out. Why should I help you out? You had all this. You were talking about the kind of angst of this kind of work milieu, I think.
I just look at I look at my mother, who worked for many years at a corporation that she despised, a bank, and eventually left, thank God. And but now she has she gets pension money on top of her Social Security, thank God. But which delights her because she's like, good, I'm taking more of their money. Forget them. But but what? Our working class here in this field, is going to has nothing, absolutely nothing, and and to have, and more. This may not be true that it's more and more, but it's certainly a lot of these publications are run by capricious millionaires. I
would say that if you're run by a capricious millionaire like Cy Newhouse of Condé Nast. Well, actually, millionaire doesn't really quite describe Cy Newhouse accurately, I don't think. You have to put a different vowel in front of it. But that's kind of ideal. It's much better than working at a place that's publicly traded, and you have, investors demanding that you produce better returns and higher profits now.
That's probably true. If you look at Tribune Company, it's like everyone's supposedly castigating them for their performance, and it's like, well, Tribune Company makes money.
True.
Okay, so it's not making a whole load of money, but it's bringing in cash. So I don't know.
Well, no, you're absolutely right on that. But their problem is that once they go out to the public markets, you give up, and this is the deal they make. Then you give up a degree of control over your fate, basically, and you make more money if you make the other people happy. And
sure.
They all the newspaper companies, made that deal a long time ago. It may not have been a particularly wise deal to make. It turns out now, as right. Dow Jones, Tribune, Knight Ridder, etc., on and on down the line will tell you.
Sure. No, but then if you look at the Nick Dettons of Gawker Media, or
speaking of capricious millionaires.
Yeah, right. This is sort of his system is sort of emblematic of a system that includes Viacom certainly and other corporations. Where full-time employees, who actually are full-time employees, and Denton provides health care reimbursement in cash. Thereby, as far as I'm concerned, making his contractors and employees, which is just the case at Viacom as well. But everything's at will, and there's no protection, certainly, and those systems are.
I was just saying this is the first defense of Gawker Media as an employer I've heard in a while. So.
Oh no, it's not a defense. I think it's I think it's a terrible system. It's ludicrous and as far as I'm concerned, extra legal. But it's a terrible way of working, and it's terrible for employees in the long run. It's something you enter into with no qualms when you're in your 20s, and once you're not, as some of us are not.
Yeah.
Certainly you.
We're in the same decade, wise guy. Don't get funny on me.
And if you look at, and this happens all over in blog companies. If you look at media bistro bloggers, and the funny in HuffPost, even the funny thing is when you try and do any sort of marginal organizing among these people, employees or not employees actually are completely afraid. Like I started reporting a story on blogger non-competes, and no one would even talk to me about what was in their contracts. It was absurd.
Well, wait, I'm not quite sure what the point is, because, who will talk to you about what's in their contracts in general? And
why do these people who aren't employees and have no benefits to speak of, why would they possibly... What interest does it serve them to not even discuss amongst each other what the terms of their contracts are? There's a whole workforce that's been brainwashed by management into... serving management's interests. At Gawker Media, different employees of different websites wouldn't even compare each other's salaries because they thought, we're not supposed to talk about that. It's like,
boy.
How do you possibly organize for a better salary? And how do you... we found out, let's say, one place I worked at once, there were 3 of us who had the same job title. 2 of us made the same salary, and one made $10,000 a year less. And we didn't know this for months because we wouldn't talk to each other about our salaries.
It's really funny, though. In general, I think management counts on people not talking about how much money they make.
Sure.
Because, there's always very weird, anomalies. And the funny thing is, people won't do it. This is hardly restricted to bloggers, although it's interesting that it happens with bloggers, because I think everyone assumes that they're really A, logorrheic and oversharing, and B, they kind of have nothing to lose, because,
well, they do, because the low-paid work is their only prospect of work. They feel like it's not like it's not like they're being offered jobs at major newspapers on a daily basis.
Well, kind of. Well, actually, no, not really, because I think the implicit deal at Gawker Media is you do this for a year and then you go on to New York Magazine or the New York Observer or something.
Big deal.
Well, but it's a job. And
it's barely a job.
I'm sorry.
It's barely a job. Here and there,
You get off the 12-post-a-day treadmill, which I feel, becomes a major quality of life enhancer once you get past the age of 27 or 28.
I guess, I think all of you guys are wusses. Like, your blog went 5 days without a post not too long ago.
I was on vacation.
Oh, you were on vacation?
I was on vacation.
Ooh, you get vacation time.
Yes, actually, I do.
Actually, to be fair, Gawker Media actually gives very good vacation time. But it's not hard. I don't understand why people are so frightened of producing lots of content.
I'm not saying it's hard. I'm just saying it's just that the bottomlessness of the whole a blog is always kind of tugging at your sleeve. And as you mentioned, I'm not compensated on doing X number of posts a day. I have a certain goal of doing a certain number a week.
Well, when you started blogging, or when they made you start blogging, or whichever happened, did you say, great, so I'm doing more content, so I'm getting X more dollars?
It's funny that it didn't really work like that. But in fairness to them, in fairness to my employers, when I came on, I made it clear that as part of what I was doing, I would be doing a blog, which at the time was a relatively new idea to BusinessWeek. I think they were a couple up. But I just figured that, particularly in this space, writing about media, and just in general for a journalist right now, you want to be doing as many things as you can to justify your existence and salary. and therefore you want to be doing as many different things as possible.
But see, I think that's a problem, and I
why is that a problem?
Well, I think every newspaper's had that problem too, where people are like, "Oh, okay, I was hired as a reporter for a daily newspaper or a weekly magazine, so now suddenly I'll do another job as well."
But you were just calling me a wuss for not blogging enough. Which one is it, Mr. Sicha?
Well, I don't think you do blog enough. I think it's useless unless you do a certain amount of content.
How much do you want? What's the bar? What is the bar for blogging?
I don't know, but I feel like even Jeff Bercovici, is that how you say his name properly?
Bercovici, yeah. He's a media blogger for Portfolio.com.
I don't think it's Bercovici.
Okay, well, I'm sure Jeff will correct us if he actually gets this far into this and watches.
No one will. Yeah, we're safe deep in the bowels of this.
I think our moms might get through this.
My mother won't. She doesn't care. She doesn't know who you are.
I hope she knows who you are.
She does. So he's a full-time, well-paid blogger, and he doesn't do anything practically.
But define anything. I mean, like, I don't understand what the bar is. Is it that you should be breaking 5 pieces of news a day? That you're doing 10 blog posts a day?
No, I don't think anyone can. My one objection to what was the 12 posts a day plan is you don't have time to do anything substantive or original.
Well, this is one of the arguments lodged against blogs, which actually you lodged yourself a little earlier.
Oh yeah, no, and Denton knows it, and and that's one of the reasons why there's feature contracts and reporter contracts.
But people aren't going to Gawker for 4,000 word pieces. I mean, they're just not. That's not what it's there for.
No, and they never will, and there'll never be those things there.
Good God, are we agreeing? I think we're agreeing.
No, but the other thing is, people do want something to read. Right,
but how they read is very different. I mean, you can get into a frame of mind where anything over than, and I've certainly done it, where anything more than 300 words can seem kind of extraneous.
Well, sure, your columns are all 687 words.
Yeah, it's generally, they go above 7 now. You've done your research. I'm very impressed.
Oh, I can read.
No, but you can count. And counting is sometimes a difficult skill set for the journalist.
That's true.
But true. But I mean, again, that's that space. When I'm involved in longer articles for BusinessWeek, they're not 600 words. But globally, there are fewer 10,000 word stories now than there used to be.
Oh, by far and away.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't. It's funny how the interests of commerce and publication making have intersected with supposedly the desire of the reader. I mean, people complain bitterly about any story longer than 800 words.
Yeah, there's just so much. But there's just so much stuff out there now. I mean, this is by no means a novel or particularly interesting observation, but. At some point, a few years ago, I became the kind of person who only was able to read books on the plane, and now it's gotten to the point where I can't even get to books on the plane. I'm reading magazines on the plane because I'm not really.
Why has your ability to read atrophied?
Because there's so much stuff that I feel that I need to be reading and consuming, and because there's so much out to snack on that therefore there's less time to sit down and do the long read. I mean, like yesterday was kind of a slow Sunday and actually read a great deal of the Sunday New York Times. And when I'm on vacation, I'm able to read at a reasonably leisurely pace the New York Times, which is a quite delightful experience. I mean, because it is a very well written piece of work. It's a pleasing thing, almost literarily. Literarily, you know what I'm saying?
All right, that sounds great. But why? I mean, why are fewer and fewer people doing so?
Because there is a kind of there's something dislocated here because I think overall book sales are really high, but I think the way people deal with magazines and newspapers is different from how they used to. Because there's so much more stuff. There's so many more TV channels. There's so much more stuff on the internet. Blah, 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 blah. And if you're in any sort of business, media, finance, politics, that requires you to be up on a great deal of information every day, you could spend your entire day just chasing down new information. I mean, it's not even my job to pay attention to what's going on in the presidential primaries, but I'm fascinated, and therefore I'm spending a great deal of time. I remember in the 2004 election, ABCnews.com was doing The Note, if you remember that, if you were paying attention.
Yes, sure.
And it got to the point where it's like September, October, and like there's a 2-hour chunk of my day, literally 2 hours, where I'm reading The Note and like going to all their links. And now there's, and in different ways I'm doing that now, and we're, so...
I'm surprised you can actually read The Note.
I was I haven't read it since then. I used to email Mark Halpern because I would be outraged. I assume it was put together by a bunch of 28-year-olds, and when they wanted to be really kicky, they would like throw in a Bruce Springsteen quote. And I was just like, are you guys, is everybody 53 years old in Washington, D.C.? I mean, like, did you guys ever, like, listen to dance music or punk rock or something? And he finally emailed me back and said, you're the only person complaining. And I was like, well...
Oh.
Well, yeah, because I don't live in Washington, D.C.
Well,
but
right.
That's neither here nor there. So, I mean, yeah, but I don't think there's any question that, media habits have changed. And you see this, just everywhere. And everyone's struggling. I mean, you have magazines like Us Weekly and Maxim that are basically magazines you look at, not read. And by the way, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean,
right.
they serve a certain purpose. But, I mean, the idea that, like 50 years ago, Playboy had to have big, long articles to justify whatever it is they were trying to justify. I mean, that's really pointless, But apparently there's a lot of pornography on the web. I don't know.
There's a lot of pornography on the web. The thing is that, but magazines agreed to do this. I mean, the most recent issue of Esquire I picked up, which I guess was January, there's half a feature article in it. It's the second half of a profile, I guess, of John Kerry or whatever. Or Timely. I don't know who it was.
John Kerry.
It was somebody like that. I don't know why I'm thinking John Kerry, but I swear to God, it might have been. It was there was half an article in this entire magazine. They did that to themselves. That's what they're giving the reader, and that's what they think the reader wants, I guess. And maybe they do.
That's true. I mean, I'm not in on focus groups, but one thing that's consistently drummed at us is that readers need more information more quickly. It's funny you mention Esquire because they've actually stuck to really long pieces. The really long pieces in Esquire are much longer than the really long pieces in GQ right now, which has really kind of truncated a lot of what they do.
Definitely.
And, like, globally that makes me sad, but, I mean, it's not like we all read all those pieces.
Well, I don't read magazines because I don't like them, but... I don't like them. I don't understand them.
Well, what don't you understand? I mean, it's like. I mean, I'm not even trying to be a wise guy. It's like pictures and text.
Well, I feel like when I go to magazines, I just feel like I'll never, I don't know what's going to be inside, and I don't often like what's inside. And also, they're all written for a market. They're all written for an ideal consumer, and I'm not that ideal consumer, and so they irritate me. And
that I understand. That point I understand.
Yeah, I don't know what they're writing about or why, and I don't like it. I don't like it at all, and I don't like the little columns, and I don't like and now I don't like all the numbers and charts and bloody crud, and I don't know. I don't.
It's kind of interesting to hear you say that because so much of what you've done is really short form stuff.
Sure.
So
yes.
There's a profound irony here, don't you think?
I think you're referring to alanity, which is like irony, except it isn't. No, that's not no. I'm actually. I mean, I'm for. Gawker was at workplace, short term, quick. Short burst, in the words of Robert Olin Butler, consumption of needs of information, and over again, when I would talk to sort of prime readers, idealized executive media honcho readers, they would say do not forget Gawker's service as an aggregator, and they're quite right.
Did that actually drive traffic? I feel that was the way that you pumped up, your post, count or something.
No, and it doesn't drive traffic. but it provides a service and it keeps a loyal reader. And original reporting drives traffic.
Right. Breaking news drives traffic, like Scientology videos drive traffic, blah, blah, blah.
Right, which, fake exclusives. Exactly. Denton did extraordinarily well in this month of January. He doubled traffic over last month so far. And, he did that by properly promoting a non-exclusive exclusive, which is great. Which is great showmanship, and actually, it was actually good journalism in a sort of Fleet Street manner.
Documentary way, yeah. Sure, I'll give him that, sure.
And I salute him, I like to think I would have done the same thing, perhaps a little less showboaty-y, but, pretty much the same way.
But, promotion is part of the game, because otherwise stuff disappears. And,
it's a circus.
Yes, it is indeed a circus.
Stop agreeing with me!
Okay, it's not a circus. It's more like a big tent.
God, I hate you.
Huh? Well, hey, mutual, babe. But, see, you interrupted my train of thought. This is the painful thing.
Oh, no.
It's gone forever. It's gone forever.
That's such a tragedy, John.
It is indeed a tragedy.
But, this brings me... This somehow.
I agreed with you again. It is a tragedy. Keep talking.
This somehow brings me back to to working conditions. Why do people want to work for as I do? So I work for Jared Kushner. I've worked for Nick Denton, and I work for Sam Zell. I guess in a way too. And why do any of us want to line the pockets of multimillionaires further? Why and then the option terms that aren't advantageous to us.
Well, then the option is to go out and invent something on your own.
Sure,
which can be done. It's very difficult to do as a straight content play, and it requires what?
Nah, it's easy.
Okay, it's easy to do, but it's hard to sustain, and then you have to put yourself in the position of running a business, which a lot of journalists don't want to do. I'm not saying you don't.
No, running a business is terrible thing.
Well, see, but you're talking about an age-old employment, implicit employment contract. Like social contract, small c, which I'll agree has its issues, but I don't know, man. It's a damn sight easier for me to go to work for BusinessWeek than to try to invent, BusinessWeek on the web. And I'm not sure that that's my skill set. Writers want to write, and they don't want to sell ads. They don't want to, sell magazine subscriptions or website subscriptions. They don't want to write business plans. And people still do want to write. Which is kind of funny if you think about it.
But the thing is, and so what we're doing is more and more useless things. Why have you kept your job? You don't need to work actually now.
Well, number one, you don't know that, and number two,
what do you mean I don't know that?
Well, you don't know what the exact situation is, and nor am I about to tell you. Corey is referring to the fact that my wife Laurel Toby recently sold her company MediaBistro.com to Jupiter Media. Something that Corey noted with a great deal of shock at Gawker.com, I might add. But
there's a couple of things about that.
Well, let me finish my thought first, okay?
Go.
I was asked to speak to a bunch of J school students at Columbia in September or October, and at some point it came out who my wife was, and one person in the class said, "Well, why aren't you sitting on the beach in the Bahamas?" And I just said, well, who here is getting into journalism for the money? You're doing something you like to do, and with luck you're getting paid something. But, my ambition wasn't not to work, and more importantly, I kind of did get into journalism for the money because I was a musician and there was no money in that.
Sure.
But you did not get into journalism, to sort of make your wad and then go, blow it somewhere. You got into it because you wanted to write and do it in a steady fashion. And do it somewhere where it was seen.
Sure. No, two things about Media Bistro. But, one is that I've been talking to an editor friend, and I actually have decided that Media Bistro was undervalued when it was sold.
Jesus Christ, I can't believe you.
After
all that crap you wrote on Gawker, now you say that.
Oh, no, I still think the editorial component of Media Bistro is total crap. I think that was the worthless part.
Well, we feel the same thing. We feel the same way about you, Corey. But But
it is.
I probably should have done this. I mean, but I'd sort of had I periodically go through these kind of what's the word, non-consorting. I periodically go into non-consorting mode with Gawker, and I was going to send you an email or call you and say, like, all due respect, you clearly don't understand, like, why this is actually a business with millions of dollars in revenue and millions of dollars in profit, and here's why. But I figured there was no upside in doing that.
No, I totally believe in that. It's very ably made a lot of money off the backs of the working poor, and done that quite successfully.
What the hell does that mean, Corey?
Well, it's a freelancer subscription service that
No, you're totally missing the point. I mean, look at how many jobs are on there. The jobs are $229 or $299 a piece, and this morning there's 1,700 up there. Do the math.
Yeah, no, that's very well. I mean, that's Craigslist money now, basically. Which is great. It's the freelance subscribers as well as the job ads, I think, that give it value. I do actually think that was a cheap price for the company at this point. The rest of it, I just don't understand. But what's
to understand? I mean, what's to understand is, like, there are things that bring in revenue, classes. This has got to be so boring for the blogging heads viewer.
No.
There are things that bring in revenue, which are classes, which are the job board, particularly the job board, which is advertising, which is I'm probably forgetting one or two things. There's some subscriber service that people re-up for. They're getting some value out of it. It's really easy to stop paying a subscription fee. It's actually not that hard.
Except with gyms who just keep rebilling you.
Actually, I haven't had any problems with that either. I mean, you call them up and you yell at them, and they back down.
Don't join Crunch.
It's funny you mention that, because Crunch expired and they didn't. Now I'm all paranoid and I got to check my credit card statement.
Check your credit card.
No, I'm pretty sure I would notice that, my friend.
Are you sure?
Yes, I am sure, Corey.
Your accountant would notice that. I just see, So what you're saying is you have your job because you like it.
Is that so crazy? Journalists complain. I love complaining. There's nothing more I like than complaining. It's better than hearing other people complain.
Oh yeah.
But I mean, if you enjoy writing and you want to be seen doing it, and you're lucky enough to be writing about something that you like writing about, I mean, I take it you enjoy writing about politics. Long pause.
Yeah.
I like writing about media. I mean, I know that this is kind of on a level that's almost a personal failing. It's just so weird and picayune.
It is.
Yeah, like I should like collect spittoons or something instead. But hey, what can I say?
Well, didn't you want to be a rock star?
I've been a musician. I mean, several times. I mean, I've been in bands for 20 years. There's Rockstar and there's sort of the day-to-day of it. It's like, I mean, the way I compare it to is that, there's people who write enormously popular novels and there's people who write stuff for a smaller audience. The music that I enjoy playing, and that I have enjoyed playing, is stuff that was never going to, go gold or silver or tin, really. Which actually was fine, because, I figured out at a very early age, I mean like 19, 20, that this was something I could do, that there were people who did want to listen to it, and there would be people who would buy the CDs and come to the shows, but that I'd always need a job. There was never the sort of dangle of making, millions of dollars off it, which allowed me not to get my head bent by the idea of signing a major label contract or thinking that I wouldn't have to have a job, or that there would be 16-year-old girls showing up with free drugs all the time, because there wouldn't be. And that was fine.
So why don't you quit your job and start a small label?
Oh my God, start a label? Oy, wow.
Well, everyone's doing it. I mean, Balthazar Getty is doing it, Anyone can.
It's actually funny you mention that, because my last band, Coptic Light, this is really boring, except for me. My last band, Coptic Light, we put out 2 CDs, and the second one, we actually broke up before it could come out, and we're going to sort of co-release it with this label that put out our album. So technically I am starting a small label, but that's just for this. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
It sort of answers my question. Are you
gonna send me a demo tape, Corey? Is that what this is about?
No, I'm not gonna send you a demo tape. Don't worry. I just think I don't know. I just think that the pursuit of capital is the town sport.
Absolutely.
And
the town being New York City. That's where Corey and I are calling from.
Yes, from separate boroughs.
I'm in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Yeah, disgusting. And I just, and so, and the surprising thing that happens to me is what people do when they get that capital. And all their friends become jealous, and they don't. I don't know. It's just funny. Then people don't ever do anything with it besides buy an apartment.
Well, they don't do anything with it besides buy an apartment. Well, I mean, there's the stuff that you do to put it somewhere and make sure it doesn't go away.
Sure.
What else? What else should be done with it? I mean,
I don't know.
You give a certain amount away. I mean, maybe. Who knows? I don't know.
I don't know. Why not move to the 9th Ward and build some houses? I don't know.
Rough summers, but point taken.
But that's easy to say from the perspective of someone with negative dollars. So I don't know.
Have we run through our topics?
We never addressed snark, by the way.
We didn't really address snark, I know. But do you have any sort of parting thoughts on snark?
This is by the way, this is a terrible co-interview. By the way, this is just abysmal. We've done a terrible job. Like, we may actually have to do this over.
Okay, sure, whatever. But you're.
I'm not blaming you. I'm blaming us.
You're ducking the snark question.
No, I just feel like, with snark, it's so much baloney. The idea that, I kind of touched on this earlier, that it's a way of diminishing criticism, and Gawker sets itself up for it because it's sometimes, wrong or slightly wrong or uninformed or, doesn't know what it's talking about, from time to time, but the idea that people are being, people believe very easily in the frenemy system of like, oh, we're mean in print to each other, but we're nice to each other in person, and that's never been the case. Certainly with me, and so I think people dismiss snark as being mean just to be sensational instead of being mean to say, like, no, this is terrible, like, this is a horrible thing, and that sort of perception from the outside is undermined, actual criticism.
That's actually a good point.
No, what?
Well, hey, I'm in a generous mood,
It's early.
It is early. It is early. No, I mean, I think that's true. But at the same time, I mean, there still is a frenemy system because people aren't outwardly hostile to each other. It's very rare when people run into each other that they're going to be outwardly hostile to each other. Maybe they should be. I had
a great experience. I was in the Times building recently, and
why were you in the Times building?
I was seeing friends. But I was introduced to someone I didn't know, that someone who worked for me had written while I was on vacation something like kind of very personal about that I actually don't know if I would have published. And this person was like wouldn't speak to me, wouldn't shake my hand, and I was like, good for you. Do you know what I mean? Like, he was offended and hurt, and was having none of it, and and I respect that. Instead of being like, oh yes, hi, how are you, nice to see you, and being like behind my back.
But I feel that that's kind of the default setting here because everyone's kind of passive aggressive and very anxious to hold on to their place.
Well, everyone wants some money. Everyone wants some money, and everyone wants to.
But wait, which money? Because there is, if you were talking about journalism, there is no money. Basically.
Yeah, there's payday out there. New York Magazine has from time to time been a farm system for Hollywood. If you get the right thing on the cover, you can option that and buy
that's a good point. You're looking at it outside just this weird little ecosystem, off the coast of America on the East Coast.
They used to talk a lot about the blogger book deal. Those
yeah,
happen.
Not so much right now.
none of them could write books because they weren't book writers. So far. I mean, actually, that's probably not true. Some of them are probably fine books. I don't know. I didn't buy them either.
Mm-hmm. I'm likewise. I'm trying to think.
So allegedly there's a cash in, but I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I feel that it's always been more about status than money, basically, which is a very powerful driver in and of itself. People don't want to lose their place.
Yeah, which is I think again playing the man's game. Like it's I don't know to what end people are trying to gain status, but I know I have a lot of 20-year-olds IMing me and my friends and saying like how do I get a better job? Should I apply for this job? Should I should I go to this part? You have to introduce me to this publisher.
Well, what's your advice to them typically?
My advice to them is to go write something good, and then people will pay attention to them maybe. Instead of spending all their time thinking about their bloody careers.
Fair enough.
And they don't take that advice. Clearly.
I think it just takes a longer time. The 200-word posts that they're crafting aren't really showing off their true skills.
That's true. Maybe that's true. Maybe the system of cranking out blog crud, undermines that.
Could be. We're up to an hour 10. I think we've.
I'm so over you.
Really? Well, that implies that I was. You were under me at one point? Never mind.
It's always the straight man who make these jokes. I thank you for your time. And your willingness. And
to think we haven't met in person still, for good or ill.
Well, exactly, because I don't want to be at some party like kissing butt.
Well, you don't have to kiss butt. You could just say hi, or we could argue with each other, or I could get outraged over one thing, or you could get outraged over another. Jeez, here I am giving permission. This is terrible. All right.
I'd rather go to a movie,
Well, yeah. See, there will be blood, but you probably already did.
God, yes.
Okay. All right, good talking with you, Corey.
All right, make a great day for yourself, as they say in California.
Right back at you.
Okay.
Bye.